Boom. All right. This is a very special edition of the NWL Hall of Fame announcements. So the commissioner of NWL, Aaron Fitzpatrick.
Fitzsimmons.
Simmons. The more tired I am, the more fitzy it gets. And I'm Matt Riley. I'm the IWAR Commissioner. So we're doing this as sort of a little different thing to like reveal who's in. So I'm going to share my screen. Ba-dum-bum-bum. All right, so this is the NWL Hall of Fame page. Now, some of you might recognize this because it's a pretty page, and it is where we announce our Hall of Famers. Now, in the game, we've had probably 1,000, 2,000 people pass through, maybe more, the Hall of NWL over the years, and it's our way of kind of recognizing the stars. And we know it's on a complete list, but this is some of the ones that stand out to us. So what I've done is I've marked off with a black mark here, like the old redacted, so
classified.
Right. So to go through here, I was saying in our pre-show that we're kind of at a point where like 2012, we're running out of people to go in. So all right, so first name, we're going right to it, and then we'll talk a little about the wrestler and move on. So first of all, Forgotten Vagrant. Now, longtime players remember the Forgotten Vagrant became the Ethereal Guardian eventually. And then he returned. He was a great villain. He was a homeless guy, wrestler. And he had a cardboard championship, much like there was a wrestler. Oh, God, the hell was his name? It's got me mad at me for this. There was a wrestler in Hollywood, championship wrestling from Hollywood, the Hobo. And he had a cardboard championship belt, which was fantastic. And what's funny is I followed him for years on Twitter. I was a big fan of his. And then he like joined a real wrestling company, like a big one, and got jacked and like completely lost his like look and style. But it was like, hey, he's jacked. Good for him. So Forgotten Vagrant was kind of like that. And his most memorable post NWL stop was in CWL. He was there for a long time, and he had a great feud with Barry Stevens. He was actually Barry Stevens was standing up to him being a psychotic homeless person. And then when Barry Stevens turned heel, they switched roles, like a double turn. That was a fun one there. So that's 2012. Yes, all the way back then. And
what name did he take on? The Ethereal Guardian?
Ethereal Guardian. And he was kind of this like religious heroic hero from above and angelic and all that stuff. And
how many of those guys from 2012 are still kicking around? I mean, if anyone should be redacted, it should be the Teamster. I think we can go back and cross him out right now. But I think I've heard of Koenig before as well. I'm not sure how many of those guys are still kicking around.
Yeah, Koenig, Andy Koenig was I think he's still around. He kind of pops up here and there, but he's one of those characters when he was in the league. Like you could read his promo and just see it happening if you were actually there. He wrote really great promos.
Right.
Like Carry On My Wayward Son was his theme. I still remember that. Right. Leonard Gage was Bob Rogers' guy. No, it wasn't Bob. It was shit. What was his name? I'm gonna forget. I won't do this for everybody. There's lots of names here. So over the years. Gotcha. So 2013, we had a big year. Rowdy Rostagini joins this group. I was supposed to block his name out, but I forgot. But Rowdy Rostagini was the first and only NWL wrestler to win the IWA Championship. And you forget sometimes how hard that is to do in general, but to be a rookie to do that. And he had a great year. And oh God, our new addition is Scotty Flash. And I talked about this earlier. He only had 2 regional belts. You might think, 2 regional belts? How is this guy a Hall of Famer? His promos and feuds were fantastic. The feud he had with Luther Alexander, where Luther Alexander was obsessed with his grandmother and kept trying to marry his grandmother, and he stole his granny's panties. It was insane.
It pretty much writes itself.
Yeah. It ended with him at the wedding, and like she turned on Luther. It was great. But like again, the writing was really fun, and what he did really well is he worked off what you gave him really well, and that's such a good thing to do in this game. Like if they give you something like I won't give it away, but there's a thing in Barry Stevens' little promo page like his little column information. There's a nugget in there, a couple of them actually, that players could work off of, but no one ever does. So I'm like, all right, someone picks it up, great. If not the end of the world.
Is Scotty Flash still around, or did he move on to greener pastures?
Scotty Flash had himself, and then Toxic and Hazard was tag team, and he had fired his valet. And the last big feud he had, well, he was IWL and he feud. Jim Spur Pile drove fire through a table, and that was a big feud. But like he stopped TTing after a while, and it's hard to feud that way. And he went back to CWL, and last I knew, he had just taken a break, and that break lasted a few years now. So I did also in 2014. I used to have Damien and role model Jimmy Digital as separate entities for the different classes. I do it differently now. It used to be like class. Now it's just by year. They had a great feud with each other, and both players afterwards, like they tried to go on, and Damien took a break, and Digital just like it was like losing your dance partner, you know?
Right.
But yeah, Luther Alexander's debut year, 2014.
Yeah.
Jimmy North was a great face. So
some pretty big names.
Solace. So just a lot of good characters in the next couple of years. And you'll notice a trend here, but the players getting better and better and better.
Yeah. I was going to say that about the NWL. I think as we break down these lists, like you just mentioned with Scotty Flash, he maybe didn't light it up on the title page, but you know, we hope with the NWL that during your 17 cycles, you have a chance to really flesh out either the strat or the TT side. Some guys are stronger at one over the other, but it's really, you know, it's a chance to kind of practice both sides of the game, and not everyone develops, you know, both sides simultaneously. So right. I think the ultimate goal is by the time they move on to the IWL or BRL or wherever else, that they'll be pretty strong at both sides of the game, I guess, is the hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing where it'll take time to figure out the strats, but if your wrestler's character's in place, or you know what you're doing with them, that's a big thing too. Because I've seen some guys that come up with funny ideas for a name or you know, a gimmick, doesn't go very far, and that's too bad. But let's see, 2015 here, we're adding Crazy Carl. So Crazy Carl is best known for being one of Luther Alexander's henchmen, and he was the henchman who Chief Bullgray Fox had a horse. I forget the name of the horse now, but it was like his prized possession. And so Luther Alexander had Crazy Carl behead the horse and put it in Fox's bed, a la Godfather. So that was one of the, you know, Crazy Carl was crazy. He was a hardcore wrestler. He did pretty well. He got 2 leagues, you know,
yeah.
Not a bad time for him there.
Is this list just going to be us hearkening back to the horrible things that Luther Alexander has done? Like there could be a guy from each year that was influenced by Luther somehow, I think.
Well, I think the good thing was when Luther Alexander finished his time as a wrestler in the NWL, he then became the commissioner. That made his power all the more devious.
Right.
Next up, 2016, we add Marcus the Monster Monroe, part of the Monroe family. They're still around wrestling. That's a Seth Brubaker creation. And they were very good in the NWL and really found their voice. And then when we went to IWL after that, and they were there for a while, had a great feud where one of the brothers turned on the others. And it was a good character growth, an arc. And I want to say he was in like the GWL, or he's around. I saw his name recently. I was like, oh, Marcus Monroe still around. And that's kind of where it's fun, like, you know, like history wise, you know, people come and go. You notice Neo Dragon's name is there right above his.
He's still going strong. He recently made the switch over to the BRL, looking to make some waves there. I guess he's been in the IWL this whole time, but this is his first foray into the BRL. So it's kind of cool to look back at some of these names and kind of see what they're doing these days, kind of a where are they now sort of thing.
Right. And that's the thing too, is you have people that like he was in the end of the IWAR draft class, and he got drafted to the IWL, and he was there for 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So 6 years. And you know, had a run. But again, that's the thing, like, you know, I always hope all the time, like, you know, if you want to stay in the IWAR, that's fine. You can find a way to work your way over here or there. You just can't work backwards, as Darren would say, wanting free Quebec in the NWL. But yeah, so whoop. Hold on.
I've heard Commissioner Johnny B is susceptible to bribes though. So if
That's fair.
Darren's listening, although I don't think the French Canadian dollar is worth much these days.
Yeah. Rhyme with Tim Hortons. So let's see here. All right, that is 2017 Jordan Drake. So Jordan Drake, another one of those players who had a very strong year, 4 TV titles, so 4 runner-up, if you will, and he's a player who, like, he used to do his promos from his bar. That was his bar, and it was like, very eccentric, and just picked up the vibe. And you can see the names like Drunken Fisherman, Wilson Smith Jr., Ricky Kyle, Joe Boring, Ricky Kyle, the first IWAR wrestler world champion out of the NWL. That was a big thing. But Jordan Drake was a fun character, and he had a slump afterwards. He came out of there and had a lot of expectations and won no titles for a year. And they kept playing. It was just frustrated. And the guy that runs that wrestler, he took a break from the game. He had his identity stolen, and part of it was like Facebook got compromised, and he just stopped doing Facebook. And so I couldn't reach him. And the last I heard, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna take a break," and that was it. It's like, all right.
I guess I think you kind of touched on something there too, is like when you graduate from the NWL, it can be kind of tough to get acclimated to the IWL or BRL. So yeah. I think we're trying more and more, and Matt's got some more ideas for some things to plug into the NWL bulletin to try and prepare guys a little bit. I know, I've seen a few. It's a bit of a culture shock once you move on there, but hopefully as time goes on, we can hopefully some guys are getting prepared for taking on those 2 leagues.
All right. So we move into 2018. And you might see some names starting to recognize now. The Chameleon.
Yep.
Nightmare Johnny Carnage. Author back into Paige Turner. Oh my goodness.
Boo.
One of my favorite characters ever created. And I would always say one of the measuring sticks of heat. I always love the fact that the entire locker room of players on their own got together, unbeknownst to me, to write a 4-page sneak attack on LePage Turner. Where everybody in the league beat him up, including this like Make-A-Wish kid came in and pissed on him while he was in the hospital bed. It was great. And then when Turner eventually kind of like was like heading out, his goodbye speech talked about, "I want to thank all those guys who did that. You toughened me up, blah blah. I'll get you back, except for that Make-A-Wish kid." I don't have to worry about you. It was like, oh yeah. LePage Turner was just a perfect execution of, like, for NWL. It just fit perfectly because he was critiquing these other rookies and being brutal, and it's not familiar, and but it made them respond, and it worked really well.
That's some heat, some locker room heat. Yes.
So next up, 2019, and you might see here Victor Possessed, Asimov, Late Night Logan Kane, Alexander J. Styles, still wrestling. Kane's on a break. But he was a great one. And joining them first, Outlaw John Nash. Outlaw John Nash. One of the weirdest things about the game is how you have these weird coincidences. So this manager, Tim, is his name. I had mentioned in like my show that I work at Trader Joe's. And he's like, "Which Trader Joe's do you work at? You're in the Boston area." So I tell him, and he's like, he worked like 5 miles from me. So one day I was a manager at the time, so I went in the store to cover, and I see him, he looks at me, and I'm like, "Yep." It was just so weird. It was like, So then, of course, I wrote John Nash was kind of a Stan Hansen type, wild, reckless cowboy brawler. And there was his brother, I forget the other brother's name, and then there was Jan Nash, his sister. And we wrote the Trader Joe's death match with pallets involved. It was super stupid. It was stupid. It was fun.
Nice. Is he still around?
He's planning a comeback. He's been kicking it around. I'm hoping he sees this video or sees that his wrestlers in the Hall of Fame, he'll consider it. Because I was told, if you played before and you didn't put your wrestler in the graveyard league, the loophole is if you can get a bulletin with, I don't have one handy right here, but if you have a bulletin with your wrestler's name and, like, you know, their stats, and you can send them a copy of the right away to proof that he exists, they'll let you bring him back. Although it should be noted that one player in particular got in big trouble because he literally cheated and changed the numbers on there. Like, he edited it, so he had a huge record with like one loss, like 10,000 wins and one loss, which never would have happened.
Photoshopped it.
Just, why do people get caught? Because they get greedy. So anyways, Outlaw John Nash hopefully will return. The feud he had with Monster Truck Tanaka was one of my favorites, because I wrote Tanaka like a 12-year-old kid, and everyone thought he was a 12-year-old player. So they loved his promos, and then when he turned into a bad guy, they were like, no! Next up, Brom O'Beran. Now, Brom O'Beran, if you don't know, he's 5'1" or 5'2". He's mute, and he's jacked. So he kind of uses like Puck from Alpha Flight as kind of thing, like physically.
The more Alpha Flight references, the better on this show, I'd say.
or Weapon X, you know, kind of like that short, stubby, strong brawler type. And Jeremy, who runs Brom, and Rodney D'Armond, I always think they've been around longer than they have because they're such good characters I know so well. And they are now called Thugs for Hire. So if you're in the BRL and you're like, hey, I want a feud with it, or involve a guy that's, you know, he loves to work with people. He's a really good player. He writes really well. So I added Brom because I always felt he had a good year, 9 regionals. Yeah. But he's like, when I think of the two of them, I always just picture Brom and like think, you know, he's fun. So Thugs for Hire. We get going with this. I don't want to get too long in here. So we go to 2020. You're going to start seeing some names. Fiction, Tyler Dresden. 2 really great writers. I was always so bummed they kind of stopped playing because Tyler, like you said before, he went to the BRL and just went from being like 200 points. He was top dog to hit the wall hard. And I felt bad, you know, but next up, joining them, Hillbilly Kevin. So Hillbilly Kevin is run by Dewey, and he was one of these great, he was doing the thing where Hillbilly Kevin had his golden horseshoe for good luck, and his uncle Randy and Hillbilly Steve, his brother, were like using it to cheat behind his back. So it was like this whole thing where, like, you know, he was, you know, whatever. So he eventually turned heel, and it was phenomenally turned bad. But the bigger picture here was, I get an email from this guy Kevin, and he's like, hey, my name's Kevin, and my friend Dewey manages wrestling in the NWL. We played when we were kids, and we haven't told him, but a bunch of us are joining up to attack him. So they had this whole thing where, like, his guy was Flash Jack Ferdinand. You might know that name. There was also Yoko Tuna, and I'm forgetting the other guy's name off the top of my head. But they came back, and it was this great thing where, like, he didn't know. And then he ended up winning, like, I want to say, like, I think Yoko Tuna won the elite title, and they showed up at the bar with the belt, and that's how they told him. It's just a cool thing to do. Like, you know, like, your friends knew about this. I always laugh because my friends, I play D&D, and I've explained this to them. I said, it's like wrestling in D&D, you know, and they were like, you know, but that was such a cool thing. And Hillbilly Kevin was a really dynamic personality. I know, you know, he came in the BL for a short time, and he's been bumping around. A little side note, anyone playing in the ASL, he's not a plant. He wanted to go to your league. You chased him off. Sure. Your loss is hopefully the CWL's gain.
I remember
Hillbilly Kevin and the Golden Horseshoe.
I remember another thing about Hillbilly Kevin and the Hillbillies. They towards the end of their run, they switched over to like the Rich Hillbillies as well. Yeah. And then some of these names like Hillbilly Kevin, and we see Flashy Jack from 2021. Like, this is kind of when I started coming into the game, and I just remember looking up to these guys. Like, they're winning all the titles, they're having all the success, they're moving on to the BRL and having success. So it's kind of cool looking back and seeing some of these names.
Absolutely. And again, this is where, you know, again, we get more of a touch, but I forgot about the Rich Hillbilly thing. That was so funny. I remember he had some good feuds too, like, you know, beyond, you know, yeah. So next up, I gotta click the right one here. Hawaiian Heartthrob. So another babyface, wrote really well. The heroic, you know, stoic Ricky Steamboat, type. And what made him fun was so I had a wrestler called Super Bombero Jr. And he was like a firefighter, son of a firefighter, and his dad was a famous firefighting Mexican. And they became a tag team. And when Fiction was first there, and before he left, it was like Bombero and Fiction, and they were like the big babyface duo. And then Hawaiian Heartthrob came along, and he was kind of like Lex Luger, the new babyface in town. Everyone loved him, the handsome hunk. And Bombero got jealous, and Bombero turned on Heartthrob. No one saw it coming, and that was a lot of fun.
That's cold.
And then of course they had that feud and all that. But Heartthrob still to this day, because they always say Neil is sneaky good too. That's the like Hawaiian Heartthrob was consistently really tough. He had 2 leagues while he was there and 7 regionals. So that's 17 cycles or 16 cycles and 9 titles. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So our next up,
still kicking around. Hawaiian Heartthrob still kicking around in the BRL as well.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time, like, if you're looking for a good guy to feud with, there you go. Bulk Slogan. So, do you remember Bulk Slogan?
Not to be confused with Bulk Brogan, right?
No, Bulk Slogan. It was funny because as fate would have it, there was Bulk Brogan and Bulk Slogan. Now, Bulk Brogan was like a Hulk Hogan type guy, with blue tights instead. Bulk Slogan was a sellout who had advertisements all over his gear, and all his promos were like a NASCAR racer where he just had gear like covered in promo stuff. It was a funny take. He had a manager who was always, he sent me a picture one time. He like had an artist do a cover for him, and I threw it on the cover of the IWAR. So it really was a great character, really funny to read, has some good feuds. I just like the aspect of like the sellout wrestler, which in a way it's kind of how it is in real life, where like there's the merch wrestlers who just plug their merch relentlessly. I've heard Danhausen like that, like just like constant like pumping up. And I get it, you live paycheck to paycheck. You want to make sure you make all your money. Your fans buy your gear, they support you.
I think Danhausen was the #1 selling wrestler on Pro Wrestling Tees in 2022.
Yeah, I get it. I mean,
followed by CM Punk, and I can't remember the third one.
Probably FTR, maybe.
I think it was something like that.
I mean, they're crazy popular. I will say this: when I went to Gen Con this summer, and I had the idea of the wrestling game, and then I went to a table with guys that had created a wrestling game. It's been around for a while, and they basically had the same idea I had, just had a different spin on it, but it was still good. They were talking about wrestlers they worked with. The only one they had a pain in the ass with was Danhausen, because they said he doesn't break character, so it's hard to negotiate.
That's amazing.
And he was like, "Well, we want to offer you this for being one of our," and Danhausen responded like with what he wanted. So I just imagine it's a difficult negotiation. All right. So moving into 2021, Flash Jack Ferdinand. Many of you know he was the leader of the modern models with U.S. Mail, the Total Package U.S. Mail, and Mannequins, and they reunited recently in the BRL. But Jack was just a pivotal part of that whole Hillbilly Kevin thing. So joining him, Playboy Mick Ferrari, who had an amazing year in his run there. Unfortunately for him, his last league championship was like after the break of the year. That's always one of the hardest parts of the game, is like guys will have like a good example. Well, we'll get to it in a second, but good example. Wrestler has a great year for like the calendar year, but their time extends past that. So they end up getting like a hot run towards the end, because a lot of guys figure out how to win towards the end before they move on. Right. So they pile on the points, and it's like, well, all-time standings, you're going to do great, but for the year, you missed out. But Mick Ferrari, him and Sam Hain caused problems. I think. What do you want to share about Mick Ferrari?
I think Master Destroyer ended up taking Wrestler of the Year in 2021.
Yes,
if I'm correct. But yeah, Mick went on to win an IWAR world title as well, and just was one of the most dominant wrestlers in 2021, along with Sam Hain and Veruca Salt, of course, who was also part of their stable. Went on to win the IWAR women's title and to be a pretty big part of the formation of the BWL as well.
Yes. Yeah, and Mick Ferrari, just a fantastically vivid character, great promos, and the thing where they went when Rhett Grady won the award they wanted, and went after Rhett Grady, just beat him up. Was like, nice, nice.
And he also maybe one of the more under the radar feuds of that year was mixed group Whoop Ass Inc. versus the Industry, which featured Rod Camino, Dave Wazalewski, and Waz as well. So
right.
I mean, 2021 was just a great year for feuds, and that feud was right up there as well.
Yeah, that was the IWAR feud of the year because I felt it was so well written from both players. Because sometimes you have a thing where a player writes really well and the other player responds, but it's not like the same kind of level or intensity. But yeah, that was good. Next up, look at this. It's Stevie Vertigo.
Still going strong.
Stevie Vertigo, yes, your wrestler, well earned. Again, NWL, we lucked out with a really great class of wrestlers. You look at like this last 2 years, 2020, 2021. I don't want to call it the pandemic bump, but a lot of players who hadn't played when they were kids were sitting around for a few weeks to months doing little, so like, oh, give it a try.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
And Stevie Vertigo was a fantastic villain foil for the good guys. And, his cast of characters, the Monsignor, Kyla Queen, and of course, Samoan Death Grip. Again, Stevie Vertigo, strong year, league title. I can't tell how many players told me like, oh, the one thing I wanted to do in the NWL is win the league title when I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, the young Lions title too is another. I think we were talking about this before. It's like you only have 17 cycles in the NWL and you want to accomplish so much, but we've had quite a few really good players the last couple of years, so it's hard for everyone to get a turn with the title. So it's, I think that says something about the league title and the young Lions title, that only a select few get to hold those belts during their time in the NWL.
Very much. And plus too, as commissioner, you're trying to like weave together the best possible main event storyline you can. So you have, people who, are fantastic characters, but this doesn't quite mesh. So you try to find a way, and then of course you can win your way in. So it's like a little bit of both. But let's see here. Who will be joining Stevie?
Going back to Mick Ferrari for a moment, I think we even instituted what we should call the Mick Ferrari clause for what was then the hardcore title. We wanted Mick Ferrari to get a shot at the Young Lions title, so we offered him the chance to give up his belt for a shot at the Young Lions title. So that kind of is a testament to how good Mick was, that we even created a rule for him to try and get a shot at the other title.
Right. That's a good point. Next up, you'll recognize this guy, the Country Hammer, Rhett Grady. So Stevie's rival, Mick Ferrari's rival, Rhett Grady, the ultimate, backcountry bad boy, hero, anti-hero. And I was happy that Rhett, when he won the BRL title, that it was Vertigo that beat him. It was like, yes,
That's another thing about the NWL. Like, as much as it's about, guys figuring out the game and the TT and the strategy, there's also like a lot of past that cross that could possibly set up feuds down the road. And I think we're going to see some more of those play out as the years go on.
I'll tell you something else too, to kind of put this in perspective. So I mentioned earlier about Koenig and how his promo was and how it stood out so much because it was so well written. He didn't use like many images. It was mostly just like written, but whatever. But Mick Ferrari, Vertigo, Grady, Ferdinand, Fiction, Dresden, Slogan, like those guys wrote. That was like, that's the riches. Like it's like spoiled over the 10-minute mark. All right, so let's burn through this. Let me set my timer. All right, so we're gonna lightning quick this. So all right, so let's move on to the next person here. Zydrate. So again, another name to add to that list. Tyler's creation of Zydrate and Nivik Largo. And while Nivik Largo was a bigger point scorer, if you will, Zydrate's promos were just blew you away. the visual look of a guy whose face is all stretched apart and whatever. I often say, like, when you look at a wrestler in the game, in any league, right? Ask yourself, could I see this wrestler on TV? Zydrate, bam. Like, just the presentation remind me kind of a Bray Wyatt, but interesting.
Yeah, very, very original.
Yeah, yeah. The promos were well written. Shiloh Wallace as the sister, just constantly, a good read. I always felt like I was waiting for Zydrate to have the big feud. And I always hate myself because I had this idea for a great US male versus Zydrate feud because Zydrate's so disfigured and Male is so obsessed with his looks.
That would have been
saying, I'm gonna wait till he has a chance, and I missed it, and now it's like he's left the game for a while. So hopefully Tyler will come back. We miss you.
Yep.
Any Zydrate thoughts you want to share?
Just a great character. He had a brief stint in the BRL, and his TTs were actually getting better during his brief time in the BRL. So I'll definitely be excited to see him back if he makes his way back one day.
Yeah. All right. So next entry is No Limits Nick Dane.
Epic. All time on the NWL list.
I gotta adjust it because he actually is 315. He broke the record for all time.
He's still gaining points. He's still gaining points as we speak.
Yeah, Nick Dane, Honor Revolt, Adams wrestlers were, like ready-made. It was like someone came in with a kit and was like, pull the cord and just let him go.
Yeah.
No Limits Nick Dane, Wolf Keenan, Lachlan Kincaid, his trio and good guys. And the feud they had towards the end there with Dishonor Revolt.
Yeah, Zanroar, Death Row got involved.
It reminded me of like a G.I. Joe thing where the old like Autobots and Decepticons, like this, Honor Revolt, Dishonor Revolt.
Oh yeah.
The whole thing and like the setup for the turn, it happened. Just such a good read, So No Limits Nick Dane, all-time point scorer. Congrats. All right, so let's see here. A complete scumbag, Caesar Sterling. So Caesar Sterling, as much of a good guy as Rhett Grady was, Caesar Sterling was the opposite. And he got really hot for a while. He won the first ever King of the Ring for a NWL wrestler, 2 leagues, 6 regional belts. And if you might notice RB, the RB stands for Rookie Brawl, which we added about a year ago almost. It used to be a thing years ago. It's basically whoever has the highest strategy score gets recognized for it. So it's an extra little bonus of 10 points. But yeah, Sterling's promos from his boats, his yachts, belittling women and other people, just
with his Ukrainian refugee girlfriends.
it was as a good a reboot, if you will, of the $1 Million Man, but made even more evil.
Yeah,
and
I don't know a servant named Pedro as well.
Yeah, yes, and then he owed a Teamster trying to sign on as a student, and that just kept failing him.
That was great.
He had Teamster's kid as his little assistant and student, and just did not work. He even begged him for money for the money match he wanted to be in. But Sterling was just a really well-rounded character, and I don't know where he is right now. I don't know if he put him in the GYL or where he is, but he said he was going to, do something with him. So hopefully he comes back.
I think he was a free agent last I heard. He was sending out the contracts and seeing who was going to sign it, if it was going to be Don King or Dick Jackson or someone else off the board.
Right. So our final new inductee into the NWL Hall of Fame, class of 2022, Rod Camino. Rod Camino, part of the industry. And again, another promos that were just over the top, funny, but heel, just a good read.
Yeah, the hot tub hot takes with Rod Camino is just like such a brilliant idea for like a Piper's Pit style or like a barbershop style kind of promo segment.
Yeah, the industry, like you had Waz and then Dave the Decision Wazlewski, who was kind of a Sandman type. So you had like the heel you had the big man, you had Rod as the creepy guy, you know, evil bad guy, but just red hot for a while too, you know.
Yeah.
And another one, like, again, if you're a commissioner, you would love to get like one of these guys, to have all these guys pass through the NWL. And this is kind of like what the NWL is about. It's like finding your character's voice, establishing it, and then when you move on to a new league, you got to reestablish yourself, but you know what your character's trying to do.
Yeah.
So, and again, a lot of time you have those former players you cross paths with that you can form alliances with, or you can have feuds with. So, you know, it really Rod Camino's feuds were really fun.
Yeah, I
And
think
again, it reminded me almost for a while of like late 80s, early 90s WWF, where you had like just this cadre of like great, outrageous characters. You know, Brutus Beefcake, Don Morocco, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, like all these different characters, you know, but they all worked well together. You can interchange them too. It's like, okay, you know, like, oh, Hillbilly Jim can't make it. Well, we have, you know, Coco Beware, you know.
Yeah, I think last we heard from Rod, he was like having a bit of a personal crisis, and he went off into the mountains to study yoga and to get in touch with himself. So he's still hanging around in the IWL. We'll have to see what he comes up with next.
Yeah. I started outlining Barry Stevens' promo, and he mentions he beat Rod so badly he broke his mind. You know, but yeah, it was a good thing. Like he went right out of well, and he came in hot with the title shot. So there was a bit of a I think Riley Reynolds won the Sole Survivor, and the way around that was, I was like, well, we'll give it to Rod, and we'll have Rod versus Barry, because Barry's not going to fight a woman, because I was going to have Barry beat her to death, because Barry's insane.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Looking at 2022, based on the year that we just had, we're going to have a few more big names to add to this list by the end of next year. And then I think 2023 is going to be another big year in the NWL.
Well, let's hope so. Crossing fingers. I know we have a lot of players pass through, and if you're watching this and you're one of the players that got on here, you know, congrats. We're happy to have you guys do it. But if you're not there yet, you know, just look at these guys around you and realize that, you know, we're here to help. They're here to help. A lot of players love giving advice and helping out. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Look for coaching, mentoring, what have you. But this was our little standoff one episode of just NWL, now New Wave Wrestling Hall of Famers over the years. So I hope you enjoyed this. We're at a minute left, so we're going to close it out. But thank you, Aaron. I'll let you go, and we will close it out. And see you folks in a few weeks for the January 17th. Oof, to new year, new scoring. So
Happy New Year, everyone.
happy New Year, everybody. And thanks.